He wasn't satisfied with ruling a country. He wanted an empire of his own. 19th century Europe, a time when powerful nations were racing to control land across the world, and among them was a king with a dangerous ambition, Leopold II. He ruled Belgium, a small but growing European nation. But Leopold wanted more land, more power, more wealth. He looked beyond Europe, toward Africa, a vast land, rich in resources, and largely unexplored by Europeans at the time. But there was a problem. Belgium was a small country. It didn't have the strength to build a large empire like Britain or France. So Leopold came up with a plan, a clever one, a dangerous one. Instead of taking land for Belgium, he would take it for himself, personally, not as a king, but as a private ruler. He presented himself as a humanitarian, a man who wanted to bring civilization and development. But behind those words was something else, something much darker. Because this wasn't about helping people, it was about control. And soon, he would gain control of a land that would change history forever. He didn't conquer it with war. He took it with words. To achieve his goal, Leopold needed support, not armies, but approval. Leopold II, he organized meetings, spoke to powerful leaders, and convinced them that his mission was noble, a mission to explore, to help, to improve lives. And it worked. At a major international gathering, Berlin Conference, European powers agreed to divide parts of Africa. And incredibly, Leopold was given control of a massive region, not as Belgium, but as his personal property. That land became known as the Congo Free State. But it wasn't free, not even close. Because once Leopold had control, everything changed. The promises disappeared. The truth began to emerge. This land was no longer a place of opportunity. It became a system of exploitation. And what started as a plan for power was about to turn into one of the darkest chapters in history. This wasn't just control, it was a system. Once he had control of the land, everything changed. Leopold II. The region he ruled, Congo Free State, was rich in resources, especially rubber. And during that time, rubber had become extremely valuable. Industries in Europe were growing fast, demand was rising, and Leopold saw an opportunity, not to build, but to extract. A system was created. Villages were forced to meet rubber quotas. Every family, every community had to collect a certain amount. If they failed, there were consequences, severe ones. This wasn't trade, it wasn't work, it was forced labor. People were taken from their homes, made to work under pressure, with little rest, little food, and no choice. The land that was promised to be free had become something else entirely, a place where people lived in constant fear, because this system didn't allow failure, and it didn't allow resistance. It wasn't just about control, it was about fear. To maintain this system, Leopold needed enforcement. Leopold II. And so, a force was used to control the region. Armed groups, tasked with ensuring quotas were met. They moved from village to village, watching, demanding, enforcing. People quickly understood. This was not a system they could escape. Families were separated, communities were broken, entire regions lived under pressure. The goal was simple: produce more, no matter the cost, and the cost was human suffering. Reports began to spread, stories of harsh conditions, of people pushed beyond limits, of a land where fear had replaced freedom. But at this time, most of the world didn't know the full truth, because what was happening was hidden behind distance and silence. But not for long, because soon, the truth would begin to surface. And when it did, it would shock the world. The system didn't just control people, it broke entire communities. By now, life inside the Congo Free State had completely changed. Villages that once lived freely, now lived under pressure. Leopold II's system demanded results. Rubber quotas had to be met, no matter what. Families worked day and night, exhausted, hungry, afraid. because failure was not an option. Fear spread from one village to another. People stopped trusting outsiders, stopped speaking openly, because anyone could bring trouble. Entire communities were affected, not just individuals, and slowly, the land itself changed from a place of life to a place of silence. But even in silence, stories began to travel, quietly, carefully, from one person to another, until they reached beyond the region. And once the outside world started to hear, everything began to shift. What was hidden for years was about to be exposed. At first, the world believed the story Leopold had told, a mission of development, of progress, Leopold II. But slowly, that image began to crack. Travelers, missionaries, writers, they started documenting what they saw, and what they reported was very different. One of the most important voices was E.D. Morel. He noticed something unusual. Ships going to Africa were full of weapons, but ships returning to Europe were filled with rubber. Not trade, not exchange, just extraction. That raised questions, serious ones. Then came detailed investigations. Roger Casement. He traveled to the Congo, documented conditions, collected testimonies, and what he found confirmed the worst fears. The report spread across Europe, across the world. People began to realize this wasn't a mission of help. It was a system of exploitation. And once the truth came out, pressure began to rise, because now the world was watching. Once the truth came out, silence was no longer possible. By the early 1900s, reports from the Congo Free State had reached the world, and this time, people were paying attention. Journalists wrote articles, activists raised their voices, writers, leaders, and organizations started questioning what was really happening. Leopold II. The pressure grew, day by day. More evidence surfaced, more testimonies were shared, and the image Leopold had carefully built began to collapse. He tried to defend himself, tried to deny the scale of the problem, but it was no longer enough, because now, this wasn't just a local issue. It had become an international concern. Campaigns were launched, public opinion shifted, and slowly, the world demanded change. He controlled a land, but couldn't control the truth. In the end, the pressure became too strong. Leopold II could no longer hold onto his personal control. In 1908, the Congo Free State was taken away from him and officially transferred to the Belgian government. His private rule came to an end, but the impact of those years did not disappear. The consequences remained for the people, for the land, for history. Leopold died a few years later, but his legacy is still debated today, not just as a king, but as a ruler whose actions affected millions and whose story serves as a reminder of what unchecked power can lead to. He built an empire for himself, but the truth built his legacy.